Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Parameshvara. Good. Oh, press cam, please. Yeah, that was my mistake. Cam on the side, on the stream deck. My mistake not to have done that. So the recording will look a little odd. For that reason, that's okay. We're learning this new system here. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Nice to have you all here for our program. Also, welcome to our many students watching this class online. We're continuing with this very powerful section, the concluding section of the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18. We'll have the slides, please, and we'll recite. There we go. Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, is that working? Everything is new and not quite working right. Okay, we'll get it straightened out. All right, we will begin with some recitation, starting with verse 58. As always, as I'm reciting the verse, read the translation and then repeat after me. Machchitta sarva durgani, machchitta sarva durgani, mat prasadat tarishyasi, mat prasadat tarishyasi, atache twamahankaran, atache twamahankaran, Nashrosyasi vinangsyasi, nashrosyasi vinangsyasi, yarahankaramashritya, yarahankaramashritya, nayotsyayati manyase, nayotsyayati manyase, mityaisha vyavasayaste, mityaisha vyavasayaste, prakritistvam niyoksyati, prakritistvam niyoksyati, swabhavajena kaunteya, swabhavajena kaunteya, nibaddha swena karmana, nibaddha swena karmana, kartum nechasi mohat, kartum nechasi mohat, karishyasya vashopitata, karishyasya vashopitata, there we go. Ishvara sarva bhutanam, Ishvara sarva bhutanam, Hriddesharjuna tishtati, Hriddesharjuna tishtati, Brahmayan sarva bhutani, Brahmayan sarva bhutani, Yantraruddhani mayaya, Yantraruddhani mayaya. Okay. Tameva sharanam gaccha, tameva sharanam gaccha, sarva bhavena bharata, sarva bhavena bharata, tat prasadat param shantim, tat prasadat param shantim, sthanam prapsyasi shashvatam, Sthanam prapsyasi shashvatam. Very good. Okay. I didn't ask, are we recording properly? No problem. Good. Thank you. All right. So we will pick up where we see verse numbers here. I'm going too far. Sorry. This isn't working all the time. All right. So we just finished a portion in which Sri Krishna reiterates the importance of karma yoga and blurs the boundary between karma yoga and bhakti. These are not two different practices, so Sri Krishna likes to blur all these boundaries because it is one. From Sri Krishna's standpoint, there's no such thing as jnana yoga separate from karma yoga, separate from bhakti yoga, separate from dhyana yoga, meditation. From his perspective, it's all one sadhana. All of it is involved. And we've made this observation before. The modern thinking is that we put each of these sadhanas in little boxes, and then we think we can pick and choose. And the danger of that is by choosing one, you exclude another. We need all. We need all four of those sadhanas, or as you've heard me say before, we need all the help we can get. How can we afford to exclude any of those aspects of sadhana? So that being completed, then we have this interesting transition at the end. We saw this verse 58 in our last class, which ended very ominously, would be the word. I don't think I've ever used ominous, the word ominous in a class before, but here it really fits in because Sri Krishna says, Atachet, but if you, Arjuna, ahankara, due to your ego, due to your stubbornness, nashroshyasi, if you won't listen to me. Sri Krishna has been telling Arjuna again and again, Uttishta, Kaunteya, get up, Yudhaya, and engage yourself in this war. Many times throughout, starting in chapter 2, Sri Krishna again and again has exhorted Arjuna, get up and fight. And now we're coming to the very end, and Sri Krishna observes, if you won't listen to me, if you won't accept my words, then what? Vinangsyasi, you will be destroyed. That's ominous. Let's see why. Yarahankaramashritya na yotsyahiti manyase mityaisha vyavasayaste prakritistvam niyoksyati. Yadahankaram ashritya. O Arjuna, ashritya. If you hold on to yadahankaram, your literally ego here, by the way, it doesn't, for our Vedanta students, this is not the technical meaning of ahankara that we've used in many classes. This is the general sense of ego. And a better translation here would perhaps be stubbornness. O Arjuna, if you hold on to your stubbornness, na yotsya iti manyase, if you think, na yotsye, breaking the words apart properly, I will not fight. I refuse to fight. If that is your conclusion, Arjuna, after all this, imagine we're here at the 18th chapter. Sri Krishna has been going on and on and on for a long time. If Arjuna hasn't gotten it by now, it's going to be pretty grim. My guru liked to tell a story about a kathakar, a traditional storyteller who was giving this Bhagavata Saptaha, Ramayana Saptaha. It was 7 weeks, 7 classes, 7 days of classes on the Ramayana. And there was always a fellow, this is as my guru liked to tell this story, he says, there was always a student sitting right in the front row who was so attentive, always came early, and was just really riveted in every class. And at the end of the 7 days of classes, this student came up, took the Guru's blessings, and said, Guruji, your lectures were wonderful, but I have one doubt. Would you clear my doubt? And yes, what is your doubt? Please tell me. And he says, my one doubt is who is the Rakshasa? Is it Rama or is it Ravana? I couldn't quite make that part out. So this appears to be, what a silly story. This appears to be Sri Krishna's concern. Did Arjuna really get it? He's not sure. Arjuna has been asking a lot of questions. But at this point, it's not clear that Arjuna has really got it. So he says, O Arjuna, if you have not understood properly, if you continue to hold on stubbornly to your resistance to fighting, by the way, please remember the reason Arjuna was resistant to fighting. He didn't want to kill his family members. Remember the context. Very serious, very heavy. So because Arjuna didn't want to kill his family members, that's why the whole Bhagavad Gita ensued. So Sri Krishna says, if you continue to hold on to your stubborn refusal to fight, then Esha Vyavasayaha, this decision, te, of yours, your decision is mithya, will prove to be false. Your decision, your stubborn refusal to fight will prove to be useless, worthless. Why? Tvam, in the last line, you, Arjuna, prakritihi niyokshyati, prakriti, nature, niyokshyati, will compel tvam, you. Nature will compel you. That's a very interesting expression. Arjuna stubbornly refuses. Sri Krishna says, your stubbornness is not going to prevail. Why? Because of prakriti here, not in a technical sense, but in a general sense of nature. Nature will compel you. Now, this is very interesting observation. Many, just to precede it, it's a little, Sri Krishna with Arjuna here is a little bit like mom with her 2-year-old. And mom says to the 2-year-old, it's time for your nap. And the 2-year-old says, no, mommy. I don't want nap. Who prevails? Mom prevails. Why? Because the child is sleepy, right? The child needs to take a nap. So the child stubbornly refuses to take a nap, but sleepiness will overtake the child and mom will definitely prevail. That's actually not a bad metaphor to describe what's going on here in this verse. Sri Krishna understands Arjuna so completely. He understands. In American English, we say, he understands what makes Arjuna tick. Nice expression. He understands Arjuna thoroughly. He understands several things. First of all, Sri Krishna understands the situation on the battlefield, which is the outcome of not a particular event, but generations, generations of events and issues have led to this. And certainly during the lifetimes of the Pandavas and Kauravas, there has been so much friction between the Kauravas and Pandava families that this war was inevitable. War is sad, war is horrible, and in certain situations like this, nothing can be done to avoid war. It's the inevitability of, in science, they talk about positively charged and negatively charged particles. They inevitably smack into each other. There's nothing you can, if they're close enough together, they have the electrostatic force on them. There's nothing that can be done to prevent them from crashing into each other. So in that sense, there is an inevitability of war based on the situation. But more, and by the way, the situation then we can understand to be the result of past karmas. Let's not ignore the fact that every warrior on that battlefield has certain past karmas that are fructifying in this lifetime, which have contributed to the whole situation. We're not saying that everything is purely due to karma, because many mistakes were deliberately made, many errors of judgment, so it's not purely karma. The willful wrong actions of many people have contributed to this situation as well. So it's a combination of karma and bad choices. By the way, doesn't that describe why suffering exists for all of us? It's always a combination. Never one or the other, a combination of unfortunate karma and poor choices. When these two converge, we suffer. And that's what's happening here on the battlefield. The commentator, Madhusudana Saraswati, makes an interesting observation here also about why Krishna knows that Arjuna's nature, his prakriti, will compel him to fight. The commentator points out that Arjuna is a kshatriya. And not just a kshatriya, a really powerful one. And the commentator says Arjuna is full of rajas. And rajas here, of course, energy and that trait of action. But Arjuna is fired up for war. All the warriors are fired up. You can imagine when you look across the battlefield and you see all these warriors gathered, you don't think Arjuna would feel afraid, because these are great, powerful warriors, not a trace of fear, but a sense of threat, a sense of impending difficulty, which means your adrenaline gets going and you prepare yourself. That's what's going on inside of Arjuna. His adrenaline is going and he is readying himself for war. Of course, he's still struggling with his emotional dilemma about fighting against his family members, and that's been the guiding storyline throughout this entire Mahabharata. So according to the commentator, Arjuna Arjuna will be compelled to fight because by his kshatriyatva, by his status as a warrior and the adrenaline, so to speak, running through his veins. One more observation here. There's a certain kind of helplessness we are all subject to in life that is not discussed much, and I'm not sure why. Many years ago, I was invited to give a lecture for a group of medical professionals, and there was a topic that I had thought about a lot in those days. And I called the topic of my talk, "The Tyranny of Neurotransmitters." Now, What are neurotransmitters? You doctors I'm talking to, after all. So what are neurotransmitters? They're the chemicals that make your brain work. If those neurochemicals don't work well, your brain doesn't work well. And if your brain doesn't work well, how does that affect you? In so many ways. Sometimes your brain doesn't work well and you feel depressed. Sometimes your brain doesn't work well and you feel anxious. Point is, do you have direct control over those particular neurochemicals that make you feel depressed or anxious? So according to medical science, the lack of chemicals like serotonin and dopamine in your brain, the absence of those chemicals makes you depressed. Any human being who has a lack of these two chemicals in their brain, they will feel depressed. Now, here's an important observation. Many people think if someone's depressed, it's a bad mood and they should just come out of it. Come on, get up, get going. It's just a bad mood. Shake it off. Maybe it's not just a bad mood. If there truly is an insufficient amount of serotonin and dopamine, these people have no control over it. We have no direct control over what goes on in our brains, and let's understand that our brains control. And this was the point of that. Actually, this is the point for Vedantins. So, I address you now not as medical professionals, although I know some of you are, but here, as Vedantins, how about if we rephrase this? Your mood is largely controlled by chemicals in your brain. Think about that. Your mood, I said largely, not completely. Your mood, every day, happy, sad, anxious, whatever it is. That mood is to some degree, and perhaps to a significant degree, it's affected by your brain. And what can you do about it? And this is one reason, from a Vedantic standpoint, we shouldn't take our moods so seriously. And sometimes we become obsessed, especially if you're in a bad mood or if you're sad or depressed, then you become concerned. Oh, I'm so sad. Oh, I'm so depressed. Oh, when am I going to come out of all of this? And of course, that response makes it worse, correct? So what I'm suggesting is that when we experience a bad mood, maybe it's a little bit like a headache. You know the headache is going to go away, and it might go away more quickly if you take some Tylenol or whatever. In the same way, you know that bad mood will go away, and especially if you do something to lift yourself up. But sometimes we take these bad moods too seriously. And it can even be, what's wrong with me? I'm sad, and all of this. I'll just share an interesting anecdote with you. Every night, like many people, I have a lot of dreams. And one thing I've understood is in most of my dreams, I'm not enlightened. Very interesting. Because, dreams will go back, many dreams go back to the past, right? Well, certainly a lot of my dreams go back to the past. So in my dreams, I'm not enlightened. In my dreams, I get involved in all these terrible things and difficulties and problems. And then in my dreams can invoke really strong emotions. I find that sometimes true. So suppose in a particular dream, because I'm not enlightened, I get so angry or so frustrated or so sad or so depressed, and then I wake up, and guess what? All that sadness and depression is still there when you wake up. Is it not? You might feel some of this yourself. So when you wake up in a bad mood, it could be that's a very mechanical result of what's going on in your dreams. Again, just reinforcing the statement that we shouldn't take our moods so seriously. They're just passing like passing clouds. A dark cloud passes in front of the sun, it's dark for a while, then the cloud moves on in the same way. Sadness, depression, anxiety, we need not take it so seriously. Let it go. Of course, there are cases where it is serious. Just to finish this topic, and we'll come back to our verse, there are people with chronic absence of serotonin and dopamine in their brains due to whatever condition it is. And if it's a chronic chemical problem in the brain, there are occasions when psychoactive medications are helpful. So let's not dismiss the value of psychiatric medications. In certain cases, they're really important. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that we should just ignore. Actually, I need to make this point very clearly. I'm not saying you should ignore your emotions. Let's be very clear about that. I'm not saying you should ignore your emotions. What I am saying is you should understand how changeable they are and not assume I'm sad today, I'm going to be sad tomorrow, next week, next month. Then don't make those wrong assumptions. Okay, enough said. So this is prakriti, nature. Nature in the form of neurotransmitters has a lot to do with our moods. And in this case, nature in the form of rajoguna, rajas, and kshatriyatva, the status of being a warrior, has a lot to do with what Arjuna will do. Eventually he will fight the war, and we'll see that as we continue. Then. Swabhavajena kaunteya, swabhavajena kaunteya, nibaddhasvena karmana, nibaddhasvena karmana, kartum nechasi anmohat, kartum nechasi anmohat, karishyasya vashopitata, karishyasya vashopitata. Kaunteya, O Arjuna, you are nibaddhaha, you are bound. Bound by what? Swena karmana. And here karma, swena, your own, karmana, by your own karmas. And here the word karma points to dharma, responsibility. O Arjuna, you are bound by your karma in one sense, and that is from past lives. Certain karmas have contributed to Arjuna being in this place at this time, bearing the responsibility to take part in this war. So in one sense, it is past karma, but in another sense, it's referring to Arjuna's current responsibilities. Either way, it is swabhavajena. It is attributed to Arjuna's nature. According to Arjuna's nature, both by past karmas and by present responsibilities, it is Arjuna. Arjuna must fight on the battlefield. Sri Krishna understands, as I said before, understands how Arjuna ticks. What that means is understands Arjuna's core values. And certainly a predominant core value for Arjuna is to follow Dharma. Arjuna's confusion would be much less if he reflected on his core values. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, what are your core values? It's an interesting question that many people don't reflect on. And maybe you should reflect on what your core values are, because you may learn something and it might help you make decisions in your life. And what I mean by core values is, what is really important to you? Sometimes we don't ask ourselves these really fundamental, big questions of life. A lot of people, I don't think you, because people who ask these questions would come to a class like this, but many people who don't come to classes like this, they actually avoid those big questions. They don't want to say, what is the purpose of my life? They're afraid to ask that question because they don't know, or they're afraid the answer is going to be, there is no meaning to my life. My life is meaningless. Many people live, there's a funny way of putting it, many people live by anesthetizing themselves. I need to explain what that means. Engaging in pleasant, distracting activities so that you don't have to think about important stuff. This is an interesting behavior. I don't think many of you would have this problem, but many others do. They don't want to deal with difficulties in life. They don't want to deal with the problems. They want to be distracted. And they seek whatever it is to be distracted. I love my mother very much, but there was an interesting anecdote about her. When I visited her once, long ago, I noticed she always had a television on, even when she wasn't in the same room. And I asked her, Mom, why, if you're not in the same room, why do you have the television on all the time? And she said something which amounted to is just a pleasant distraction, makes her feel not so lonely, etc. And that really was significant. It helped me understand her a lot. And it shows this tendency that some people have to avoid dealing with the difficulties of life by, as I said, so to speak, anesthetizing themselves, by seeking pleasant distractions. Again, I think that probably doesn't apply to those of you who come for a class like this, but for a great many people, it does apply. But now let's take it a step further, and that is, why not deal with those big questions of life head on? They're in the back of your mind. Am I doing the right thing? What am I doing? I have this job, I have this family, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Am I really fulfilling my purpose in life? It's a big question. It's worth asking. And if you say, but Swamiji, it's uncomfortable. It's those uncomfortable questions that are the most important, because it will reveal your core values. You will understand yourself so much more deeply. Then when it comes time to make major decisions in life, you'll make the right decisions. Many times we don't make the right decisions, in part because we don't have this deep understanding of ourselves at a psychological level, at an emotional level, and here we're talking about almost at an existential level. What is the purpose of my life? What do I want to accomplish in this lifetime, given how brief life is? These are the big questions of life They might be difficult questions to ask of ourselves, but they are so important to ask such questions and deal with the difficulty. Okay, so this is Arjuna. Arjuna's core values are well understood by Sri Krishna, and that's what he's pointing out. Oh, Arjuna, you are bound by your responsibilities, and by extension, you are bound by your core values, especially your value for following Dharma. And then he continues, na kartum na ichyasi, na ichyasi, if you don't want kartum to fight, and in this context, if you don't want to fight, yat mohat, due to your confusion, due to your stubbornness, due to your stubborn refusal to participate in this war, if you continue to hold on to your stubborn refusal, Sri Krishna says, you have to break out the words, karishyasi avashaha. Karishyasi, you will do it. Tat, you will do that. Avashaha api, because you are helpless, but to go in the direction your core values compel you to go in. That is, Arjuna is compelled here to follow Dharma. That he resists it, like the child who resists the 2-year-old who says, I don't want a nap. The child is resisting Dharma. Dharma, in the sense of what is good for the child, is taking that nap. Arjuna is resisting. Sri Krishna says, you will be helplessly compelled to follow Dharma. And I guess one more message there for us all is, in life we hit these bumps, these difficulties in life, and sometimes we resent the difficulties we're faced with. Why did this happen to me? This shouldn't have happened to me. That kind of resentment, that kind of resistance, well, that resistance is like the 2-year-old saying, I don't want to go to bed. It's inevitable. The 2-year-old has to take a nap. There's no two ways about it, as they say. In the same sense, when we hit those bumps in life, we don't have a choice. Why should... Interesting. Someone who feels like this shouldn't happen to me. Have you ever thought like that? Maybe. This shouldn't happen to me. Doesn't that sound like the 2-year-old? This shouldn't happen to me. Are you in charge of the world? That you can kind of manipulate the laws of the universe to make things happen the way you want? Who guaranteed you? Who gave you a guarantee that your life is going to be all nice and everything is going to be what you want? There's no such guarantee. So that kind of resistance, like Arjuna's resistance, this shouldn't happen to me, sounds a little bit like the 2-year-old. It is happening to me. I didn't choose it. I can't choose to avoid it. It is happening to me. And here's the kicker. If I resist what is happening to me, my resistance will make my response poorer. I will respond better to this challenge if I accept it, deal with it. I'm sorry to say, they say grow up. Grow up means not you, but someone might go on complaining and complaining and complaining. You know someone like that, right? They go on complaining and complaining, and eventually you want to shake that person by the arms and say, come on, grow up. Just deal with it. Sometimes that's a message we all need to hear. So instead of complaining and complaining, to accept this is what's happening, this is due to karma and whatever decisions I've made in my life, this is what it is, let me deal with it. Instead of resisting, instead of complaining, let me make the best of the situation. You know that. Let us make the best of every situation. Okay, we'll see one more verse. Ishvara sarva bhutanam, Ishvara sarva bhutanam, Hridesharjuna tishtati, Hridesharjuna tishtati, Brahmayan sarva bhutani, Brahmayan sarva bhutani, Yantraruddhani mayaya, Yantraruddhani mayaya. Oh, this is an interesting verse. Sri Krishna says, referring to a word from the prior verse, avashaha, helplessly. It's an adverb, means helplessly. So here, Sri Krishna wants to talk about Arjuna's helplessness. Maybe helpless is the wrong word, because helpless has a very negative connotation about it. Better, instead of saying helplessness, can we rephrase it? Let me withdraw that word helpless and instead refer to accepting the inevitability of a situation. From one perspective, you can call it helpless, but helpless sounds very depressing. It just sounds depressing, helpless. On the other hand, someone who accepts the inevitability of the situation they find themselves in, that person is not depressed. That person is mature. That person is preparing themselves to make the best of the situation and do whatever can be done, do whatever is right. So instead of calling this a state of helplessness, let us rephrase it as a state of understanding the inevitability of whatever is unfolding. And think about the seriousness of Arjuna's situation. On the battlefield, all the warriors gathered there, and in just a few hours, the war is going to break out, and for 18 days there will be horrible conflict. This is right on the morning of the first day of the battle. Arjuna is highly aware of the seriousness of the situation, and Sri Krishna wants to help Arjuna not feel helpless. Sri Krishna wants to help Arjuna accept the inevitability of this situation, because only when we accept can we do the right thing. Otherwise, we're resisting and complaining. Resisting and complaining is a problem. Arjuna has to rise above that and do the right thing. So here, Sri Krishna in this verse describes the inevitability of the war that's going to take place by saying that Ishvaraha, the Lord, Sarva Bhutanam, of all beings, Hrideshe Tishtati. Arjuna, O Arjuna, Tishtati, the Lord of all beings, Tishtati, abides, Hrideshe, in the hearts. You can also connect it to Sarva Bhutanam, the hearts of all beings. The Lord dwells within, and in a technical Vedantic sense, this is not very Vedantic, but just to understand it from a Vedantic standpoint, certainly we can say that the consciousness because of which Ishvara exists and the consciousness because of which you exist are not two different consciousnesses. There is one all-pervasive consciousness. The same consciousness that makes you a sentient being is the same consciousness that makes me a sentient being, is the same consciousness that makes Ishvara a conscious being, but not a conscious being like you and me, a conscious being who is the karma phala data. We are agents of action. Sorry for stumbling over my words. We are agents of action. We choose what we're going to do. But as we've discussed starting way back in chapter 2, we can choose what we do. We cannot choose the results. Karmanyevadhikaraste. That's exactly what that famous verse says. You can choose your actions. You cannot choose the results. Results are in Ishvara's hands. And that's what Sri Krishna says in the last half here. He says that Ishvara, the God of the cosmos, as the karma phala data, as the giver of the fruits of what we do, the giver of the results of our actions, that Ishvara, Brahmayan, he controls sarva bhutani, all beings, yantra rudhani. Interesting metaphor. The yantra here, yantra in Sanskrit is any mechanical contrivance. That's its meaning in this context. It has other meanings in other contexts, many other meanings. Here, yantra means a mechanical contrivance, like a mechanical toy, like a wind-up toy. I don't know if there were such things in ancient times, but that would be a good example. Like a wind-up toy, Sri Krishna says, Ishvara makes all beings brahmayan, move about. Actually, a better metaphor is puppets on a string. So the God of the cosmos, as the giver of the fruits of action, make sarva bhutani, make all beings brahmayan, move about. Mayaya, through his power of Maya. Through the power of Maya, manifest as his ability to give us the results of our past actions, and to give us the results of past actions at a particular time and place. Because the time and place at which your past karmas fructify can be highly consequential, as it was for Arjuna and all these warriors on the battlefield. So the God of the cosmos is like the puppeteer. Now, this verse is often misconstrued to suggest that we are like puppets, and Ishvara is control of everything. We have no free will. This verse is used to deny the existence of free will, which is absolutely incorrect. Are we puppets? Did my hand go up right now because Ishvara is pulling a string? I chose to raise my hand. I made a deliberate choice. Now, it turns out this topic of free will is exceedingly complicated. I absolutely agree. It's exceedingly complicated, and even today, great philosophers and scholars continue to argue, some arguing for the existence of free will, some arguing against the existence of free will. So far, no one has won that argument. Really, that argument goes on in scholarly philosophical circles around the world, even today, 2,000 years after this. And it's not surprising then that in the Mahabharata itself, you see arguments. In fact, Mahabharata is famous for how it deals with the issue of free will, because in the Mahabharata there are certain characters who argue against it, and there are others who argue for it. For example, some of you will remember many years ago when we were studying Mahabharata, we saw some brilliant chapters in which Yudhishthira described how free will works and how free will is absolutely connected to the doctrine of karma. By the way, understand that if you deny the existence of free will, the whole doctrine of karma becomes meaningless. The whole doctrine of karma is based on actions you do deliberately. If you have no free will, you cannot commit a deliberate karma, in which case you cannot incur any karma phala. The whole doctrine of karma is based on free will. Yet there are many who argue against free will. Now, it'd be interesting. What do you think is Sri Krishna's perspective on free will? Notice here when he says that we are all like puppets on strings, yantra arudhani sarva bhutani. When he says we are all like puppets on strings, do you think he really means that we have no free will and we cannot do any deliberate action whatsoever? We're not going to see the next verse, but just look at the first line when Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, tam eva, to that Ishvara, sharanam gacha. O Arjuna, you should seek refuge. Gacha is a verb of command. Like when you, in Hindi mein, chalo. Exactly the same meaning. Gacha equals chalo. Tell me, would you say to an inanimate object, does this have free will? I don't think so. Suppose I say to this bottle of water, chalo. That would be silly, because this bottle of water has no free will and is incapable of motion. Notice in the next verse, which we'll see next week, in the next verse, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, sharanam chalo, seek refuge. Arjuna is telling Arjuna what to do. If Sri Krishna knew that Arjuna had no free will, why would he command Arjuna? So the very fact that Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, sharanam gacha, seek refuge. O Arjuna, use your free will to decide correctly and seek Ishvara's blessings. Sri Krishna wouldn't say that if Arjuna lacked free will. So here we see very clear evidence that Sri Krishna absolutely accepted the fact that we have free will. Definitely you can argue it endlessly. I don't deny those arguments. There are plenty of good, powerful arguments against free will. There are. Powerful. But what is the benefit of engaging in those arguments? That's unclear. Because the fact is, and this is how I have come to resolve this argument for myself. I've looked deeply into these arguments, and personally, I find the arguments for the existence of free will and against the existence of free will, to me, the arguments are equally compelling than how to resolve it. And the resolution is this. These arguments are philosophical arguments. You might remember prior discussions we've had when we said Vedanta is not a philosophy. Vedanta deals with our experience of suffering. And here's the resolution. Whether or not free will truly exists from a philosophical perspective, I don't know. One thing I know for sure is that I experience having free will. We all have the experience of free will. The experience of free will is non-arguable. You have to, it's just human nature. We experience ourselves as having free will. Vedanta correctly addresses us, not according to philosophical truths, but Vedanta addresses us according to our experience. We experience ourselves as willful beings, and these teachings help willful beings like ourselves help us escape worldly suffering. So here we have to recognize the difference between schools of philosophy, which can argue for or against the existence of free will. Vedanta is not a school of philosophy. Vedanta addresses us at the level of experience. Experience of suffering, experience of free will. And the doctrine of karma comes along with that. We'll end with one more observation. Then along the same lines, someone can argue, does the doctrine of karma truly exist? Is the doctrine of karma true or not? And here again, philosophers can go on arguing endlessly, although at least in this case, in my opinion, it feels like the arguments for the doctrine of karma are more powerful than the arguments against the doctrine of karma. But yet, you can go on arguing it endlessly. But again, these philosophical arguments are in the realm of philosophy. Ultimately, what counts is not philosophy. What counts is suffering and that which can remove suffering. And absolutely, the doctrine of karma can help you deal with suffering and difficulties in life better than any other doctrine, any other belief. We can't prove the doctrine of karma to be correct, but we absolutely know that the doctrine of karma relieves suffering, addresses the problem of suffering in a very effective way. So, a little bit on free will here, so please don't misunderstand. It sounds like Sri Krishna is saying we're puppets on strings, but that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is we can choose our actions, we cannot choose the results. And the results shape and mold our lives in that sense. That we can't choose or control the karmas that unfold in our lives. In that sense, Ishvara is in charge. Ishvara as karma paladata, the hands from whom we receive the results of our actions. Okay, a good place to conclude for today. We'll see the next verse in the next week. A couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow, we have satsang. Can you press the cam button? Thank you. Yes. Tomorrow we have satsang at. Will that go off? Okay. Tomorrow, Sunday, satsang at 6 p.m. Come and join us. If it's not raining, we'll meet out in the picnic area. If it is raining, we'll meet inside here. Also, there's a bit of gardening work to be done. The weather is pretty nice today, and not much, maybe a maximum half an hour. If you'd like to stay back and do some gardening, you can meet volunteers in the lobby after class and help out with the gardening. Okay, we'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. You'll want to press number 3. There you go. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kavingavidam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shrinvan Utibhisida Sadhanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavadvyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma hamratangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat